Yeah, so I guess we could start off with the number one overall pick, which is probably the easiest one.
Yeah,
Um,
so again, at number one, obviously, like you said, and like we've said multiple times, obviously me and Ken have been doing drafts for a while. A lot of times we like use the notion that the draft starts at two or the draft starts at three, based on again like usually for the number one pick doesn't always happen. The team that selects in the number one pick needs a quarterback that's most likely wider at number one, and there's usually a consensus number one overall quarterback. Now, for this draft, there is a possibility that maybe very similar to last year, a team could jump back into the first round later and draft a quarterback, or again, the second half, maybe one other quarterback could go. But for right now, really the only consensus first round quarterback, and then again, number one pick is Fernando Mendoza. I think Ken could definitely agree with this. For me, I think right now it really all comes to timing for the Raiders. Why this is the consensus number one overall pick. Not only was Fernando Mendoza the most consistent player throughout the year in college football, and again, you can't take anything away from him. Flawless season, 16-0, won the Heisman, won the national championship. But just based on the Raiders' like trajectory and where they were going, I mean, we saw them go for a Geno Smith. We saw them go for a Jimmy Garoppolo. So they tried the veteran move that hasn't really worked out. They bring in an offensive-minded coach in Clint Kubiak, who a lot of us are high on, and then again they have pieces on this offense: Ashton Genty, Brock Bowers, who they drafted in the last couple of years. That could also grow with Fernando Mendoza. Now, for me personally, I am not high on Fernando Mendoza as high as other people are. I think he has the ceiling to be again maybe a back end top 10 quarterback. He wouldn't be my selection at the first overall pick, but again, it is projections. He wasn't even my top quarterback when I went over to quarterbacks, which could shock a lot of people. But I don't really want to go into that today. But Fernando Mendoza, again, he is probably the most pro ready quarterback when you talk about, again, the ability to be accurate on all three levels. And then again, his prototypical size as well and playing for this powerhouse program and great coach like Kurt Signetti. So he does have an opportunity to grow in Vegas. My biggest concerns, I've said it time and time again, you really have to have the ability to be a dual threat quarterback in today's NFL. We see again when you look at the top half quarterbacks in the NFL, very few of them football to any. And I believe Fernando Mendoza, he has an awkward running style, and he has the ability to extend some plays here and there in big moments for Indiana. I believe that gap's going to close even more because the again NFL is a lot faster. They have way more faster players when you talk about the depth of an entire defense. And I think his inability to extend plays at a very high level, and you look at the offensive line for the Raiders, again, I don't really know how that's going to work out. I'm not super high on Fernando Mendoza. I don't think he's an elite quarterback prospect. But again, this isn't a very deep quarterback class where, again, we said there may not be another quarterback that goes in the first round, possibly at the end of the first round. So, again, with your trajectory of the Raiders and him being consistent all season, this is the number one pick. And I think everybody could agree that this is going to be the number one pick.
yeah, really no pushback on that. It's most likely he's going to be the selection, and it's going to be a very tough situation to be put in. I am a big fan of the Clint Kubiak hire, getting an offensive-minded head coach in there. It's going to take some time. Now, it's not like he doesn't have anything around him. He's going to have Ashton Genty. He's going to have Brock Bowers. But there's a ton of work that needs to be done with this Raiders team on both sides of the ball. They're not great at protecting the quarterback. They don't have a lot of skill position players. Like there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get this program up and running out in Vegas, getting them on the right path. But also the fact that they just play in one of the toughest divisions in football with the Chargers, the Broncos, and you figure the Chiefs are going to be better next year once again with the healthy Patrick Mahomes. So yeah, it might be a rough couple years, and we'll see what happens if they can get uh, this team turned around.
All right, so that takes us to the number two New York Jets. Now, for the New York Jets, I believe they are kind of in a little bit of a weird spot at number two. We were talking about teams that could trade back. It is possible, but at the same time, when you talk about trading back for some of these teams, you kind of have to have the demand to trade back, and usually that comes within quarterback needy teams. The Jets are a team that needs a quarterback, but there is no quarterback, like we said, that could be selected within the next 15 picks. So now you kind of go off of, again, I think there is still a lot of debate for who could be selected number 2 pick, but now you go, what position is going to give you the most value? That's my theory on it. When you're talking about not selecting a quarterback, then you turn to edges, linebackers, maybe guys that could really bring up a whole defense and make a defense elite. Now, for this pick, for me personally, I believe there were two guys that you could really debate, possibly even three. I believe Avril Reese is going to be the pick, so let me go and select him. But at the same time, I also think it could very easily be David Bailey. And then I also think you could throw in Ruben Bain in the mix as well. So those are three different edge rushers. Why I lean for Avril Reese, one, obviously the pedigree at Ohio State is phenomenal. But why I really leaned on him is I believe this is the guy that has the more upside. I think when you look at David Bailey as an edge, this is a guy that could be a set edge rusher and be a set contributor day one in the NFL. Avril Reese is a little more of a project, not necessarily a project, but a guy with more upside. When you look at Avril Reese, you're kind of looking at somebody who can mold into that Micah Parsons role. When you look at a linebacker that could drop into coverage, or again, a guy that could play on the edge and distribute sacks, I think Avril Reese is a guy that could play a little bit more all over the field and has that versatility, which brings more upside at the pick. That's why I like him a little more to the Jets. Again, it's all going to come down to development as well. And then also when you look at the Jets, why I love them so much going defense. Again, we don't know how much longer he's gonna be his coach based on again the season they had last year. But them having a defensive coach in Aaron Glenn, I do think they're gonna go defense. Again, I like Avril Reese. You could argue David Bailey. You could argue Ruben Bain as well. Again, I do think David Bailey is more of the product that's going to transition a little easier right away. But I do think he's that set edge rusher that plays one position. And again, he played for a phenomenal defense. So we're going to talk about him again in a couple more picks. But I think Avril Reese is the guy that definitely brings a little more upside when you talk about a guy that could play all over the field, multiple positions. And a lot of people look at that Micah Parsons type player and how he could change an entire defense by being able to have that versatility. And I think Avril Reese, like I said, could mold into that.
Yeah, so with the Jets, I mean, they are one of those teams, like you said, like I've said, that could trade out, trade down. I think really for them, especially with these first couple of picks, because the quarterback class is pretty weak this season, this upcoming draft, that they really should put an emphasis on the defensive side of the ball and go all defense or mostly defense with their picks. With the moves they made at the trade deadline, they pretty much gutted their entire defense, trading Quinnen Williams, trading Sauce Gardner. So, and like you said, with the defensive minded head coach and Aaron Glenn, you got to make this defense more respectable again and build it back up to, similar to what it was a couple years ago. And again, it's amazing how this defense went from being, a strong unit, under Robert Saleh to what it was, this season. And after, what they did at the trade deadline, I mean, they're giving up an average of like 25 points a game, so really defense, I think, is what the Jets should do. Obviously, if this was a strong quarterback class, we'd be saying a completely different thing. Obviously, Dante Moore was someone that was connected to the Jets, but he's going to be going back to school. So that kind of took him out of it. Could the Jets still take a quarterback in this draft? Absolutely, in the later rounds. But yeah, here I either see them trading down or taking a defensive player.
Yeah, and like you said with the Jets, just to basically cap them off at this pick, I think the Jets are in a little bit of a better position than other teams that are, again, don't have a quarterback and aren't a contending team right now. Because you look at the Jets with the multitude of picks that they have, like you said, if they wanted to take a quarterback, trade up at the back end of the first, they also technically kind of have three first because they have pick 16 in this draft and they also have pick 33. So again, you're one pick out of the second round as well. And then you have another second round pick on top of that, along with we know they have the Colts pick next year and they have the Cowboys pick next year. So this is a team with like a lot of draft capital. So again, if you want to ride this year out, either not select the quarterback or again select the quarterback a little later, then again maybe they have upside, maybe they don't, or you go bridge quarterback. You do have a multitude of picks to rebuild this team where some of the teams just don't. I get it, the Jets are really bad. They've been bad basically our whole entire life, but they do have a multitude of picks to fix things up if they make the right decisions. So Alvaro Reese is at 2. Now coming at number 3 for the Cardinals, I do kind of feel like the Cardinals are in a little bit of a weird spot. And what I mean by that is, again, you're looking at another team that doesn't have their quarterback situation set by any means. And the weird thing with the Cardinals is we don't even know what direction they're going to go in with their quarterback. I mean, one day we see Kyler Murray is going to get traded. Another day we see that they're going to stick with Kyler Murray, that they're open to doing that. They also have Jacoby Brissett, who again could be a bridge option. And then again, very similar to the Jets, they have a top end pick and they can't select the quarterback because there's none viable for the pick. Now you could go edge rusher for sure, but I don't think the Cardinals defense necessarily needs that. Now, for me, I actually had them going with a tackle. I have them going with Francis Mauigoa out of Miami. Now, the thing with this pick for me is that a lot of people may argue that this guy can go a lot lower. This guy is maybe has the 8 to 12 value, but I believe this is the biggest need for them. And the other thing I do want to discuss with this pick between Francis Mauigoa and Spencer Fanu, I believe those are two guys that you were necessarily splitting hairs. Why I went with Francis over Spencer is because I think Francis, again, like with the gauntlet that Miami played towards the end of the college football playoffs, I believe he showed that this offensive line as a unit for Miami could get protection over the most ferocious defenses when you look at how they played against Ohio State and when you look at how they played against Indiana. So I believe that little bit of that stretch separated him over Spencer Fanu. And then again, Spencer Fanu was injured later the year as well. I think both guys, you could definitely split hairs. And then again, my biggest thing, if you're going to take an offensive lineman with a top 5, top 10 pick, and again, you know this from last year, let it be a tackle. A tackle is going to be a way more influential position on that offensive line than a guard. So again, him playing a tackle position, I also think is pretty good as well. You could go again, like I said, if you want to go with an edge to change around that defense, but I kind of believe their defense is sufficient at the edge positions. And then again, when you look at their offense too, like they're in a weird spot because they got two receivers, two young receivers that still have belief in them. Obviously, Michael Wilson had more production again this year. And then you look at Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think anybody has also gave up on him by any means. We talked about a couple of years ago how this guy was, again, this top end wide receiver elite prospect. So they do have two really good pass catchers. Then you also had Trey McBride, one of the best pass catchers in the league at the tight end position. And then again, we're going to talk about Jeremiah Love the whole entire draft until we get to his pick. This is a guy that has the argument to be the best player in the draft. We know they have this need at running back. But again, I don't think they're ready to contend yet. And we had this argument last year with Ashton Genty. If you're not ready to contend, why take a running back? Because we know they top end like kind of in their first couple of years. So, like again, Cardinals could go a variety of different ways, and they're in this very weird spot because we don't even know what the quarterback situation is going to be. I have them going offensive line, Francis Mauigoa at the rate.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem with that. I don't think they should go running back. That would be a huge mistake for them. I think we, like you talked about it, we'll get a clearer picture depending on what they do with Kyler Murray this offseason, what they could do at quarterback. Honestly, I don't even think Jacoby Brissett would be a bad option for them to go into next season with, and then maybe you try to draft a young guy to sit behind him. I feel like that could work. I mean, he was. I don't think he was that bad. I mean, the Cardinals really didn't win a lot of games, obviously, but I didn't think he was that bad stepping in for Kyler Murray when Kyler Murray was injured. I don't have a problem with offensive line. They did kind of address the defensive line last offseason. I know they brought over Sweat from the Eagles, as an edge rusher. So yeah, I mean they could go a variety of different ways, whether it is with the offensive line, whether it is on the defensive side of the ball. Again, quarterback class not that strong, so depending on what they do with Kyler Murray, like I said, maybe they take someone later in the draft. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, so again, as you're getting into these top end picks, you're looking at teams that could go a lot of different ways because, again, they just have so many different needs. Then when we get to the later picks, obviously we could break it down into really team needs, and these teams are flexible because they, again, have way more positions established. When we're looking at the Tennessee Titans now, they also fall into that category that they have a bunch of needs. They obviously select Cam Ward last year at the first overall pick. So to have their quarterback for now, again, he hasn't shown yet that he's going to be their franchise quarterback, but they're definitely going to ride with him for the next year and a half, 2 years. So they're not in the position that the other teams are in where they need their quarterback. They have the guy there that's going to be there at least for the immediate short term. So again, there are a lot of different ways you could go with this pick. You could look at this pick and say, hey, do I want to give Cam Ward something to develop on the offensive end? The way I kind of look at it is I like, again, the edge rushers because they could, again, take hold of a whole entire defense. And really, the way I look at it is Robert Saleh got hired as the head coach there. His teams have an identity on defense. And I think he's going to want, again, the best defensive prospect that makes this defense an elite unit. I'm going with Dave and Bailey out of Texas Tech. Again, I believe he's way more of the safer option when you look at edge rushers in this draft. I believe he's kind of that plug and play edge rusher who's going to know his role right away, rush the passer. And like I said, you could go a variety of different ways. You could give Cam Ward something to work with, as again, he is that young quarterback and you want to see him develop. But I look at it as Robert Saleh's team have identity. They're going to be defensive teams regardless. He's going to try to mold them into that. And he's going to take, again, the top prospect at this pick and the best thing to shore up this defense in David Bailey.
Yeah, I don't dislike the pick. And with Saleh now as a head coach, it does make sense there. I think they could also be another team that maybe you address the offensive line with that pick as well, because the offensive line wasn't very good. I mean, Cam Ward just did not have a lot around him last year. And I are they one of the teams that has a lot of cap space this offseason? I'd have to look. I feel like they might have.
I think they have a decent amount of cap space.
So maybe they go and they get some veteran receivers as well if they want to do. I mean, I know they have Calvin Ridley, but we talked about Calvin Ridley yesterday on one of our shows, and obviously his prime is behind him. So maybe they look to add somebody via free agency. I don't dislike it. I think you either address the offensive line or you could address the defensive line with this selection. But the Titans are one of those teams where they need a lot. I feel like Cam Ward got better as the year went along. Still very young, obviously going into his second year. So and now you got Brian Dable as the offensive coordinator. So we'll see if that pays off. But with Saleh, obviously, you want to build up your defense. So yeah, I don't really, I don't have a problem with the selection.
Yeah, and then again, like Cam Ward, very tough player to evaluate because again, you almost feel like he had no chance with how early a coach got fired and the talent he has around him and stuff like that. So it's going to be very interesting to see. And I do like the coaching hires with Saleh, with Dayball, and then like you mentioned, yeah, like again, they could go offensive line, they could go edge, they could go receiver. I mean, again, this is a team that was really bad this year. They have a lot of needs, and there's a lot of different ways they could go. I just think again, they kind of if you go David Bailey, you kind of go again with a need that you have and impact need at the edge. But again, this is a pick that they could go a variety of different ways. Now I kind of feel like at 5, you're going into teams now that some teams at least that again have a little bit more positions figured out. When you look at the New York Giants, obviously they have their quarterback in Jackson Dart, a guy that I hammered for last year. They traded in back end of the first to get Jackson Dart. They do have a really good front seven as well, I believe. They do have some pieces on the offense now. Again, going into pieces on the offense, I do believe this pick is going to come down to two players that both play for Ohio State. It's going to be Caleb Downs or Carnell Tate. I believe those are the two players that are rumored at this pick. It's going to be whether do you want to pair somebody with Malik Neighbors or do you want to shore up that secondary. Now, with the pick I'm going with, I'm personally going with Caleb Downs. I've expressed to you, I believe he is the best player in this draft. Again, for me, it's either between him or Jeremiah Love. The only argument with the Caleb Downs pick is that you're looking at the safety as kind of a luxury pick. How I kind of look at Caleb Downs, he's a Swiss Army knife. I believe he could be a leader on this defense. And I believe a safety position, depending on how great that safety develops, can be a position of value. I think you're getting a guaranteed good player. The other aspect I also want you to look at is when you look at who they brought in as head coach, who do they bring in? They bring in John Harbaugh. John Harbaugh has prioritized the safety position now 4 years. When you look at John Harbaugh early in Baltimore, he had Ed Reed. When you look at him later, he has Kyle Hamilton, you could argue is the best safety in the league as well. So this is a guy that definitely prioritizes that position. And again, for a secondary that does need help, I believe this guy could definitely shore up the secondary. I wouldn't mind Cardinal Tate at all. We are both very high on Cardinal Tate. But I do think when you have a Malik Neighbors and if they sign back Wan'Dale Robinson, that's also going to be something that maybe could tell us a little more about this pick later. But I think those are two. Again, Malik Neighbors has top receiver in the league upside. And then also Wan'Dale Robinson, I think, is a very good secondary receiver. Maybe they do need to bring something else in that room, but I think they could do that later. I don't think there is a safety secondary player to the level of Caleb Downs. And then we also always see receivers, whether it's via free agency, whether they just bring in another secondary piece, or if they go in the second round, possibly third round. Like we see receivers still come out and be top receivers in the league in those rounds. So I go Caleb Downs here again. I do think it's going to be the battle of the two Ohio State guys who get selected. I really don't even see another player possible at this fifth pick. I kind of think it's those two guys.
Yeah, my only pushback with the pick is that after the Giants let go of Xavier McKinney, they drafted Tyler Nubin, and then they also brought in Javon Holland last offseason. Joe Shane paid him a lot of money. So those two safety positions with those two players, that's my only pushback with that. With receiver, I feel like the Giants secondary obviously needs work. Don't get me wrong. If they can, bring in another corner or two, that would definitely help. The receiver depth, though, behind Neighbors and, depending on what happens with Wan'Dale Robinson, is kind of thin. So receiver, I would lean towards that right now. But I also could see another scenario which the Giants could be a team that could trade down potentially as well. So that's kind of my thoughts on their pick. Defensive line, I think they're fine, obviously. I would never say no to an offensive lineman, but I don't think they're going to make that kind of pick there. And obviously, for the moment, they are set at quarterback. So that's kind of where I'm at with this pick. I feel like they could use another playmaker on this offense, but secondary is something that they are going to prioritize one way or another, whether it is through the draft or free agency.
Yeah, so again, as we said, it's going to be a battle of who really goes from Ohio State within that fifth pick. But at number 6, we have the guy that we are also debating that pick with. We have Cardinal Tate going to the Cleveland Browns. Now, again, very similar to the Giants. I do feel like the Cleveland Browns do have some positions shored up. I believe their whole defense is pretty much shored up. It's one of the best defensive units in the NFL. We look at them having defensive rookie of the year caliber guy there. You have Myles Garrett, who you could argue is the best defensive player in the entirety of football. They drafted Mason Graham last year. So, again, I think that defense is shored up. My only debate with this pick, it was just whether they were going to go receiver or were they going to go in the realms of a tackle, an offensive lineman. I do think, again, the offensive line isn't horrible, but it definitely could use another piece. I went Cardinal Tate because I don't think Cardinal Tate is just going to go lower than 6. And I do believe we've said this with the Browns. They could use another offensive weapon for sure. They have Quinshon Judkins, but the way that it ended this year, who knows how he's going to come back. And then they have Jerry Jeudy, who they did pay, who I still like Jerry Jeudy. I don't know if he's ever going to be a wide receiver 1 in the NFL, but as a second receiver, I kind of love him as a second receiver. I think they could definitely use a Cardinal Tate, a guy that could be a wide receiver 1 on their offense for years to come. The only odd thing with this pick as well is I don't even think the Browns are high on any quarterback in their room. We expect it to be Shedeur Sanders, but who knows? Could give Deshaun Watson a shot, could give Dylan Gabriel a shot, could make, again, maybe draft another quarterback later in this draft. Who knows? But again, for a team that doesn't have their quarterback situation figured out, to give them a weapon is a little weird. But I do think at worst, again, depending on what happens with the Myles Garrett stuff, if he's on this team, again, another year from now, if you add in this offensive piece in Cardinal Tate, and then you also have this defense shored up, we're looking at the year after next. You either have best case scenario, Shedeur Sanders pans out, or you have a team, again, that needs a quarterback that isn't that bad of a destination anymore because they do have a lot of their holes. And again, possibly if they draft Cardinal Tate and maybe add something on the offensive line, be a free agency, or again, with a later pick, this is a team that maybe could ride with their defense and isn't even that bad of a scenario for a Shador Sanders or Deshaun Watson and can maybe win on the backs of their defense and have enough on offense again to maybe take them somewhere. I don't think the Browns, again, are as far off as the sixth pick may lead them. Very similar to the Giants at 5. I believe these are two teams that aren't that far off as contention as maybe a fifth, sixth pick normally is. But again, to sum it up, I do have them going Cardinal Tate.
Yeah, I mean, like the Jets, they're one of those teams that, I mean, we'll see, with what they end up deciding to do with quarterback next season, if it's Shador Sanders from the beginning. But yeah, like they aren't that far off. If they can figure out their quarterback situation, like they can be a decent team because they, like you said, the defense is still well put together. You got the defensive player of the year over there with Myles Garrett. Um, Unlike the Jets, they're kind of that team that needs to go all in on offense. And, whether it's shoring up that offensive line, adding another weapon, whether it's Shador Sanders, whether it's Dylan Gabriel, or whether it is Deshaun Watson, who ends up starting for them next season, they got that's the area that they have to address, especially with their first pick. And, obviously they have Jacksonville's pick later in the first round, so they could double up on offense. So yeah, I mean they are one of those teams and they made the playoffs a couple years ago with Joe Flacco at quarterback, starting those final 5 games. So there is, there's some good pieces on this team. And they got some young offensive weapons now. Quinshawn Junkins obviously, got hurt last season, late in the year. So hopefully he can bounce back from that. But, did pretty well in his rookie season. Fan in the tight end. It was pretty good for them. But yeah, they still need another pass catcher or two in this offense.
Yep. So that now leads us to the 7th overall pick with the Washington Commanders. Again, another team that I believe could go a variety of different ways. I believe this team possibly has the worst running back room in all of football.
It's definitely up there.
Pretty much. And again, Jeremiah Love is one of the best players in this class. But for some reason, when I was making this mock, I do not see them going running back here. And again, I don't know if Jeremiah Love, if a team's going to bite or if, he's going to go as low as we have him going. But I actually went with Ruben Bain here. Again, I kind of think the Commanders are a lot farther off than people think. Again, that really depends on what you think of Jaden Daniels. And Jaden Daniels, I think, again, has the most wide range of opinion out of possibly any quarterback in the NFL right now. Because, again, the way his career went the last 2 years has been very weird. When you look at Jaden Daniels, the first year, he arguably had the best rookie season in the history of the National Football League. Then when you look at the second year, he didn't play well to begin with. Then he got injured. So now this is a wash. So it really depends on how high do you think Jaden Daniels is as a quarterback in this league. But I also think this Washington team has a lot of holes. Like I said, it could be Jeremiah Love. I also think that a lot of people that are making mock drafts also believe it can be a receiver. Obviously, their receivers are on the older side. But again, I think this Washington team does have a lot of needs. And I don't think the receiver position is at the top of it, even though, again, you could argue Terry McLaurin and Debo are on the older side. I don't think they take a receiver this high. In my opinion, like I said, I do think it really comes down to Ruben Bain or Jeremiah Love. Ruben Bain is a guy that, again, was arguably the best player in the national championship. When you look at, again, this guy has an edge. Another guy that I believe is a plug-and-play edge and a guy that could change around the whole entire defensive unit. And, again, I do think, even though Washington was in the NFC Championship not that long ago, I do think this team is farther off than people think. I believe you get the edge that really sets up this defensive unit and makes this defensive unit, something to be reckoned with. Even though, again, I think Jeremiah Love is definitely viable as well. I guess my only knock was I think the Commanders are a little bit farther off from contention than other people do. Maybe if you think that the Commanders, again, could be a legit playoff team next year, then you go with Jeremiah Love. But again, I think this pick really depends on how you personally view the Commanders and Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think you do go either defense or offensive line. The defense also, I mean, the previous year when they went to the championship game, I mean, they got shredded by Philadelphia. In the running game, I wouldn't say the defense was completely shut down, and then obviously last year was not great at all. So I think that's definitely a unit that needs some upgrades there. So I think I would probably lean towards more so them taking a defensive player here. Obviously, the pass catchers, like you said, are on the older side. The running back room is not great. And you got a quarterback that, even though he played very well his rookie season, he also missed some time with injury. So, on top of last year missing a lot of games with injuries, even the year before that, when they went to the NFC Championship game, he was injured. So, durability is a bit of a problem for Jane Daniels in his um, his early NFL career so far. But yeah, I would say defense is what they got to do with this first pick. Go that way. I don't have a problem with that selection at 7 there for them with their first pick.
All right. Now going into number 8, I um I have Jordan Tyson going at number 8. Now, we talked about Jordan Tyson a lot yesterday as we did a receiver episode going over the top receivers of the draft. And I said that I like Mekhi Lemon a little more than Jordan Tyson, but I do believe Jordan Tyson is going to go in front of Mekhi Lemon just because of having that prototypical NFL size. The biggest thing with Jordan Tyson, he could have been the first receiver taken in this draft. And again, who knows what's going to happen? He still can be. But the biggest thing with him is durability. Is he going to be able to stay on the field? We discussed last we discussed yesterday 2022, 2024, 2025, all these seasons he has dealt with injury. But it's a guy, like I said, with more burst possibly than almost anybody in this entire draft. He has the size, he has the ability to play every receiver position on the field. And the biggest reason why I like him to the Saints, I like him pairing up not only with Chris Olave on the other side, who again, Chris Olave, a couple of years back, we didn't even know how long this guy's NFL career is going to be. Now he seems motivated to help in Tyler Shuck. He said that in multiple interviews. And Tyler Shuck is a guy that I didn't really like coming out of the draft, but he's a guy that surprised me and I think surprised everybody around the league. He ended up being really good, having a really good rookie season when he did come in. So I think you saw something from him. And then the biggest thing to me, too, if you get Tyler Shuck and his offense to develop even further, the division they're in is like absolutely wide open, in my opinion. I think it's a horrible division. A lot of people thought it was going to be the Bucks division. Bucks dealt with injuries. Bucks are also older. And then again, Carolina Panthers, we all know they really weren't a playoff team. Again, I do believe they have hope as well. But again, not like a juggernaut you're really worried about. And then the Falcons, I do believe, have two great units on both sides of the ball, but just can't figure out the quarterback. So again, they have that question mark with them. So I think again, you could argue that Tyler Shuck is going to be their franchise quarterback, and why not pair him up with a great weapon like Jordan Tyson and have two dynamic weapons that could really play all over the field. And again, I don't know if I discussed this already with this pick. A lot of people were thinking running back Jeremiah Love, which I actually do not mind him going to the Saints because, again, I believe the Saints could be a team that could be a playoff team as close to next year. Like I said, with the quarterback that they have and what opened the division, how they ended off the season, like it is possible. But again, I think again with them having Kamara and other people in that room, I just see Jordan Tyson as a better fit.
Yeah, I mean, if they were to go running back, I mean, Kamara is obviously on the older side, but back in the day, I felt like it definitely worked a lot better in the Saints' favor when you had Kamara being that, pass catching running back with more of a traditional running back. When they had Mark Ingram there, they had Latavius Murray there. Like I feel like that worked well when you had him working alongside another running back. But obviously that was back when the Saints were competing in the NFC, being one of the top teams in the NFC, and trying to go to another Super Bowl with Drew Brees. Now it's a little bit different. Kamara's older, and this team is not the same like it was back in those seasons. But yeah, no, Tyler Shuck definitely I think surprised all of us with how he played. The Saints looked like they were going to finish with one of the worst records in the NFL, and they finished with more of a respectable record. They definitely played a lot better down the stretch last season. Kellen Moore, not a bad first season, all things considered. And it seems like maybe they might have found something with Tyler Shuck. So adding another pass catcher, that's not a bad way to go. I know they got some older defensive players, and they traded away guys, Marshawn Lattimore, last season trading him to Washington. So defense could be another possibility for them. Yeah, I mean, adding another receiver opposite Olave, I think could work as well. Olave, I thought played really well last season, all things considered. I mean, again, he was contemplating retirement with all the concussion issues, and then put together a good season. So I don't have a problem with that pick.
All right, now at number 9, we could stop talking about him, or we could talk about him right now and then stop talking about him. We have Jeremiah Love going to the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, for the Chiefs, I think this pick could really determine the Chiefs' future and how quick they turn things around, because I believe if they were able to get Jeremiah Love at number 9, this could be one player completely, again, get the Chiefs out of, again, missing the playoffs to making it yet again. Obviously, and with Patrick Mahomes being the best quarterback in the league, in our opinion, they believe they have a chance to make the playoffs every single year. Obviously, this year didn't go as planned, but for a guy like Jeremiah Love, this guy is so versatile, and he is a guy that I think could not only be a running back that could go 80 yards, he's also a guy that you could line up at receiver and is like the perfect modern day running back. And he's a guy that I believe that's going to explode off the scene very much like an Ezekiel Elliott or a Todd Gurley very early in his career. So this could be the one guy for the Chiefs. Not only do the Chiefs need something in this offense, but this could be a guy that could be one of the best players at his position in the first year in the NFL. And that's exactly what a team that wants to contend like the Kansas City Chiefs need. And then again, like I said, with the Chiefs having a passing attack that's Patrick Mahomes at the helm, to have a guy that could be an elite pass catching running back in the NFL like Jeremiah Love gives Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid the capability to use this guy in a variety of different ways. I think he can completely change this offense. And I think this is like the perfect pairing, like I said, because you have a guy like in the running back position that's gonna have his best years early in his career, and he's going to a team that could contend early in his career. I absolutely love the fit. Now, again, what's going to be weird with the Chiefs is a lot of people have the expectation that possibly maybe Brees Hall could go there via free agency, or they could do something like that. So what the Chiefs are going to do via free agency could definitely change this pick. And then again, like for the Chiefs, you're sitting there at 9, waiting, hoping that a top guy in this class falls to 9. I'm not sure that's going to happen. We discussed again 3, 4 other teams before this that could possibly go Jeremiah Love and see him being again that guy that could put you right into contention because he's going to be a great player right away. So again, Chiefs in kind of a weird spot, and I believe this pick could really determine their future because who would have ever thought going into last year that the Chiefs could have a top 10 pick? And again, obviously, they aren't a team that people look at as one of the 9 worst teams in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, we talked a little bit about it yesterday. I feel like the Chiefs can bounce back and be a playoff caliber team again next season. Um, it was kind of like the reverse from the previous year where they won all these one score games. It was the exact opposite where they lost a lot of one score games. I feel like they didn't bounce back as well as they did after the Tampa Bay Super Bowl where they knew what their weakness was, offensive line, and they were able to correct that. And then sure enough, they're back in the AFC Championship game and then they win back-to-back Super Bowls. So I do think that's something that they are going to try to address this offseason. But I feel like one thing during this entire run with Patrick Mahomes is they've never really had like an elite running game. So if they can go and get the best running back in this draft, I feel like that would definitely get themselves back into the conversation of being a team to watch out for in the AFC. And we also talked about how the AFC really isn't that big of a powerhouse. So I think it's one of those things where they go and they address the offensive line. They could, address it in the draft, but I feel like they could take Love here, address the line in this draft, get some guys to help out the line in free agency, and with Mahomes being healthy next year, this team could be back to being, a competitive playoff team. And with an added running game along with Patrick Mahomes, that just makes them even more dangerous.
Now, the other thing before we just cap off Jeremiah Love in general for this episode, the biggest thing with Jeremiah Love, too, not only is he this elite talent at running back, this isn't a deep running back class at all. If Jeremiah Love gets selected within the top 10, there may not be another running back that goes in the top 50 picks, Whether you look at Jadarian Price, who might be the second best running back in this class, who played at Notre Dame with Jeremiah Love, or if you want to look at Jonah Coleman, or if you want to look at Emmett Johnson, you're looking at guys that are going to be probably selected round 3 and above. So the running back class isn't deep, so it may cause a team to maybe go earlier than expected for Jeremiah Love because there isn't that option later in the draft, which I think is interesting. Now we get into number 10. Obviously, everybody knows where we're going to lean with number 10. We're going to go, obviously, on the defensive side of the ball. I feel like this is the second, third year straight we have been saying this with Cincinnati. But again, obviously, their offense is prolific when Joe Burrow is healthy and they have everything in sorts. And I actually think their offensive line was not as bad as in years past. I think their offensive line was pretty solid. Maybe they could use an offensive lineman, but I don't think that's where they're going to go here. They went Jamar Stewart last year, who again hasn't really produced as they expected. I have them going Sonny Styles this year at number 10. Again, a linebacker that's also pretty versatile as well, could help your defense. And I think the biggest thing too, why I have to go defense is who knows if Trey Hendrickson is going to be back for this team. So again, you're looking at the best defensive player on your unit possibly not being there. So you got to go with defensive player, but not only that, defensive player at a position with impact. I think Sonny Styles is just the best available prospect at 10 with the draft that we have and the players that went in front of him. So I think they go Sonny Styles here. And again, like I said, a lot of people think Cincinnati, when they're all healthy, could definitely be a team to contend with because of the quarterback that they do have. But there's no doubt that they need to shore up this defense if that quarterback is going to stay there. I have them going Sonny Styles at 10, like a pretty obvious pick with the position and the team needs.
Yeah, so they are, basically one of those teams last couple years now. Yeah, they got to go all in on the defensive side of the ball. That's, along with Joe Burrow getting hurt the last couple of years, the defensive side of the ball has been a major weakness of the team. And if they can get it back to how it was the first time, similar to how it was the first time Burrow and the Bengals went on that run, this team could be back in the playoffs again, and they could be a dangerous team. So I don't have a problem with that pick. And it is going to be tough now with Trey Hendrickson probably on his way out because now you're going to have to replace him, which weakens the defense even more so. And they didn't really have him last year either. Like I don't even, how many games did he even play last year? Right? I'd have to go back and look, but yeah, defense is obviously where they have to go to get themselves back to being a playoff team. And obviously the health of their quarterback is very important as well. They got to make sure Burrow's healthy too.
Okay, so